folks, and welcome to another helping of Mr H's Hot Pot. Join myself, Mrs H, and little Toby, as you can hear there in the pram, outside Carleton Cemetery, which is in Blackpool. And this cemetery is quite well known locally for having stars of TV and film buried here, and some have been cremated here. And we're going to take a look at some of those graves today. Now these stars will be from the 40s, 50s, 1960s, that type of era. Over in America they have Hollywood Forever Cemetery, we've got Carleton Cemetery. So, without further ado, follow me now as we head over to the Rose Garden, which is the Gardens of Remembrance, then we're going to make our way over to the burial plots. So, follow me and little Toby and Mrs H. Right, so we're now in the Rose Garden here of Carleton Cemetery, and this is where they scatter all the ashes, you know, from people who wish to be cremated. This is like their Garden of Remembrance. They usually scatter the ashes over there, and then they either get a memorial plaque on these walls, or they put the ashes in like a little urn inside and then put that over, very similar to how they do in America. And we found our very first star, which is here, this one here. God bless Violet Ellen Carson, OBE, born 1st of the 9th, 1898, died 26th of the 12th, 1983. Now Violet Carson played the old battle axe Ina Sharples in Coronation Street. Those of you who've got very long memories and can think back to the 1960s, I can't, I wasn't born then, but apparently she was in the show from the beginning right up until 1980, and as I say, she played the old battle axe with the earnet on, and she had that very battle axe type of face. She was a lovely woman in real life apparently, but she certainly knew how to play Ina Sharples as an old battle axe. Probably coming from up north, she'd seen those kind of women herself, so that's why she was able to play the part so well. So that's the first of our stars. We're now going to take a little look around the Rose Garden, because there should be a memorial to John Cormer, who played Sid in Last of the Summer Wine. He played the cafe and the owner in the 80s, up until his death. And there should be one to the pint-sized comedian Jimmy Clitheroe. For those of you who don't know who Jimmy Clitheroe is, if anybody's ever watched the Crankies ripped his act off, you know, playing the little school lad. So we'll take a little look around now, and we'll see if we can find those memorials and grave markers before we move on to actual graves. Now we've had a little look around some of these plaques here on the walls, and we can't find a memorial stone to John Cormer, which is the actor who played Sid in Last of the Summer Wine, you know, with the cafe owner. He also played a part of a shop steward in a film called I'm All Right, Jack, with Peter Sellers. Very good film if anybody out there wants a bit of a laugh at how they used to think in the 1970s with strikes. Anyway, his ashes are actually in this bed here, which is RB18. What they've done here at this cemetery, they've created lots of rose beds, hence the name, the Rose Garden. And they spread ashes in certain ones. And like I said, John Cormer's, or John Owen Cormer should I say, is in RB18. Now if anybody out there knows that he does have a memorial plaque, please let me know in the comments below. We've taken a look up and down here, haven't we, Mrs H?
Yeah.
And we can't find it, so I don't think he actually has one. Listed on the cemetery website, it's just simply RB18, so I should imagine there's no memorial stone to him, unfortunately. Anyway, we're now going to move on, and we're going to take a look at where Jimmy Clitheroe, which is the pint-sized comedian of radio and television and film, where his memorial is. Now, it is a tree apparently, which is very similar to these trees here, which is at the back here. And his has been removed for whatever reason, whether or not there was problems with tree roots or whatever, or it was rotted, or they just simply wanted the space, but they've removed it. It was removed sometime in 2008, 2010. So we're going to take a look at the spot where the tree was, but where his memorial now is, we don't know. So come on, we'll take a look at where his memorial once was. So we're now in the spot where Jimmy Clitheroe's memorial tree once was, and it would have been around here. I should imagine it started out like these little ones have here, but it probably just got too big, and they decided they needed to take it down for whatever reason. I should imagine somewhere in here, you know, they'll have put a memorial plaque up to him. Now, Jimmy Clitheroe, unfortunately, he never married. He didn't have any children. He lived with his mother. And being only 4 foot, because he had something wrong with his thyroid gland, and that's why he couldn't grow any taller than 4 foot. He lived with his mother, It's the old story of his mother was a little bit domineering, and when she died, he was devastated, and he was put on sleeping tablets, you know, to help him sleep and that, and he took an overdose, sadly, on the day of his, accidentally, on the day of his mother's funeral. They found him unconscious and he passed away. He'd had about 7 brandies and an overdose of sleeping tablets. It was ruled that it was accidental. Whether or not it was, we don't know. But this is the spot where he would have had his memorial tree. Right, we're going to move on now to the actual graves. Like I said, this is just a gardens of remembrance. We'll actually be able to see a few graves from some of the old stars, so we'll make our way through now and hopefully we'll be able to find those graves for you. Right folks, well we're now in the actual area where there's interments, you know, burials. And the first grave we've come to have a look at is the grave of Norman Evans. He was a famous comedian from way back when. His catchphrase was always "over the garden wall," and they've actually put that here on his headstone, you know, his last garden wall, which is in brackets underneath his name. And rather fittingly and nice, his memorial is actually made to look like a garden wall, and that's the reason why. I suppose if you didn't know who Norman Evans was, you'd just pass that and you'd just think, oh, it's just a normal gravestone, but that's why it's been built like that, because that was his catchphrase apparently. Right, the next grave that we're going to take a little look at and we're going to have a wander around and try and find is that of Frank Randall. Now Frank Randall is one of Wigan's famous sons and one of Wigan's forgotten sons really, because his act, it was a very Marmite act. You either loved him or hated him. Right, we'll go round now and we'll see if we can find that grave. So here we are now at the grave of Frank Randall. We managed to find it eventually. It's not too far in off the main path. Now, as I say, Frank Randall, who was born Arthur McEvoy, he had a film career and he made a number of films, but he was very much a victim of the times, because what he was making jokes about the situation, which was rationing and things like that. Well, once the 50s moved into the 60s and things like that, people weren't interested in that anymore. It'll be a bit like in a number of years' time when Brexit settles down. Nobody will be interested in making jokes about it, so he became a victim of that. And as I said, some of his work at the time, Randall's Scandals being one of them, it was very close to the knuckle and people didn't like it. He's very famous for having a long-running dispute with the Chief Constable of Blackpool at the time, and he got many a ban saying his act was lewd and, you know, it was disgraceful type of thing. People found it, you know, obscenity and all that. And he got a number of fines. There was only small fines, but just think of the publicity he bought with that. And what do people do when you see something like that, when people say, you know, that act's bad? You'll go and see it, won't you, just to see the controversy. Now, there's been a number of people who've tried to imitate him, but nobody could ever do it quite like Frank. As I say, one of Wigan's famous sons, but one who's forgotten. He's probably just as famous as George Formby, but people don't remember Frank Randall. Right, we'll now have a little wander through and we'll see if we can find our last grave before we wrap this video up. So folks, I'm now going to show you our last notable grave of this little tour of the cemetery of the Northern Stars before me, Mrs H and Toby head off. And it's the grave of Arthur Worsley, who was a big ventriloquist back in the day, very famous with his act. Unfortunately, this grave has no marker. It only has a vase pot which appears to have lost its top, and it doesn't look like anybody's visited this grave in quite a while, probably because people don't see it, unlike Norman Evans's and Frank Randall's, which are pretty well maintained. Right, that brings us to the end of this little tour. Now, these stars that I've showed you in this tour aren't the only ones who have been cremated here. Stanley Mortimer, the footballer, Reg Dixon, Mr Blackpool himself in the Tower Ballroom, he was cremated here, and Beatrix Potter was as well, who did the children's books. But their ashes have been moved to elsewhere. Right then folks, we're going to get off, because like I say, little Toby, he's getting a bit agitated over there, isn't he, Mrs H?
He is.
He's wanting to get fed. Hope you enjoyed this little tour, and if you do come and visit these graves yourself, just be a bit respectful. Remember that, you know, this is a place of rest. Right, we're out of here, so until the next time, from myself, Mrs H and little Toby, it is bye-bye for now.